All right, listeners, to start the show today, we are going to play a little game of Two Truths and a Lie. Today's episode will be covering the Marvel acquisition by Disney, and we are going to throw out the two truths and a lie right now, and we will tell you which one is a lie at the end of acquisition history and facts. So get ready to predict. Number 1. For a brief stretch ending in an internal Time Warner investigation, the president of DC Comics acquired a large position in Marvel stock. Number 2. Famed corporate raider and comic book villain Carl Icahn once made a play to gain control of Marvel from bankruptcy. Number 3. Marvel owned Fleer, the baseball card company, and was affected in a huge way by the 1994 Major League Baseball strike. Which is the lie? You be the judge.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth?
Welcome back to episode 26 of Acquired, the podcast about technology acquisitions. I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. Today's episode is Disney's 2009 acquisition of Marvel. It really completes the saga for us here at Acquired, where our first episode was the Disney acquisition of Pixar, then our sixth episode was Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm. And all three of these, I believe, will have pretty similar tech themes, and David, I think will really be able to kind of understand Disney's strategy and what their portfolio looks like these days.
Yeah, this is I feel like I always say this, but this will be a fun one.
Yeah, no kidding. And kind of a fun one here going into the holidays. It's a nice one to tie up the year.
Totally. Speaking of Disney's triumvirate of IP acquisitions, I am pretty excited about Rogue One.
Yeah, I thought you'd bring that up, so I rewatched the trailer right before we started recording.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah, me neither. For listeners who, if you're wondering, I'm not sure if it actually will sound any different, but this is the first time David and I are recording remotely. David's in California right now.
In the heart of Silicon Valley.
Indeed.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about a new partner of ours here on Acquired, Legora, the agentic operating system that is redefining how the world's best legal teams work.
Yep, it's sort of obvious that AI is going to completely change the legal industry. I bet most of you listening have dropped a contract into some sort of AI chatbot out there. Legora took that insight and asked the question, what if you really built something with that power from the ground up for the legal industry?
So the founders did exactly what great founders do, operate with obsessive customer focus. They embedded inside a massive law firm for months. They sat with the lawyers just watching how the work really gets done.
And that's how you get features that customers love, like Tabular Review, where you drop in a folder of hundreds of contracts and it pulls every key term into a grid a lawyer can actually work with. Legora's bet here is interesting. Since it lets each lawyer handle more complexity, any given person can increase the quality of their work and do higher value work. And this means that the pie can grow even as each individual task takes less time.
And they recently launched Legora Agent, offering greater intelligence and performance. The agent lets lawyers set an objective. Then it can handle the planning and the execution and delivery of the final product. Legal teams get to maintain full control and transparency since they're still involved where judgment is required.
And Legora works where you already work. You can use it within Microsoft Word while redlining or drafting. The early Legora numbers essentially speak for themselves. When they have a head-to-head pilot with their top competitor, they win 70% of the time. Legora now has over 100,000 lawyers on the platform from 1,200 legal teams in 50 countries. And crazily, they went from 1 million to 100 million in ARR in about 18 months.
Truly insane numbers. And that is the real test. Plenty of things demo well, but the question is whether a busy associate actually reaches for it during crunch time, or whether a partner trusts it before going into a conversation with a major client. If your legal team wants to check it out, whether you're a law firm or you're in-house at a company, you can learn more at legora.com/acquired and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right, well, We don't really have too much before the show. Do you want to just dive right in?
Yeah, let's jump in. So, this, I can't remember. We've done so many of these episodes now, but this might be the earliest back in time that we're starting our acquisition history and facts.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it is. We are going back to 1939, almost, almost 80 years ago, when a fellow named Martin Goodman founded a company that he called Timely Publications in New York City. Very timely. Goodman was a pulp magazine publisher, and he wanted to get on the gravy train of the fast burgeoning comic book industry that was starting to take off. And so he started Timely Publications as part of his publishing empire. And the first comic book that Timely published was called Marvel Comics #1, which came out in October 1939. And it included the Human Torch and the Submariner, which would be Marvel comic book heroes for a long time to come. And
the Submariner is a little bit more of a deep one.
Yeah, that's I see what you're doing there.
It's ayo, I didn't even mean it. Hey, it's pretty cool that it's that the very first issue was called Marvel Comics. And I think that through a crazy history that we're about to hear of all sorts of different ownership structures and consolidations and unbundling and rebundling, keeps the same name.
Yeah, well, interesting though, they didn't actually change the name of the company to Marvel Comics until 1961. Right. So, 22 years later. But the very first comic book that they published was called Marvel Comics. And apparently it was a big success. It sold almost 1 million copies, which I think is a lot for a comic book, probably especially a lot for a comic book in 1939. But the company, Timely, would go on to do quite well, create, many of the iconic comic book superheroes and villains that we all know and think of today. Captain America was the first really big one that they created in 1941, which was, I guess World War II was going on at that point in time, but the U.S. either hadn't entered yet or was just about to enter World War II. The Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Iron Man, Thor, the whole, many others. Lots of, basically, I love superheroes, but I'm not a huge comic book aficionado. So as a casual comic book fan, everybody I know kind of except Superman and Batman, came from Marvel.
And who at Wonder Woman?
Yeah, Wonder Woman too. Yep. That was also DC Comics.
It's pretty much the whole crew. Yeah,
it's DC had, the big Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and then everything else is Marvel. So they go on, they create many of these characters. And then in 1961, like we said, they actually changed the name of the company to Marvel Comics. Also in 1961, the editor of Marvel, who was a man named Stan Lee, who actually started at the company as an office assistant. He was apparently Martin Goodman's wife's cousin, and started at the company in the early days as an office assistant, and became sort of the spiritual head of the direction of Marvel and the comics.
And very briefly, actually, the president of the studio, right?
Yep.
It's one or 2 years in there.
Yeah. A towering figure in Marvel history. He decides to kind of push the company in a new direction in 1961. And that was to make comics that were aimed at slightly older audiences. So not just young children. And that was, the first of those was the Fantastic Four, which they launched in November 1961, and was the first time that comic book heroes were sort of, they'd always been the Superman sort of perfect image of masculinity often and heroism, and the Fantastic Four were sort of like they squabble with each other, and they were kind of, anti-heroes in a way.
Right, more human.
Much more, even though they had superhuman powers, much more human than the Superman of the DC franchise. And that really kind of set the tone, and Marvel became much more, it really sort of expanded the market for what they were doing and what comic books as a whole, as an industry was. And that was their namesake. And so, Spider-Man was sort of like the quintessential, like, teenaged angsty superhero.
Boy, did we ever see that in Spider-Man 2.
Oh man, yeah.
The Sam Raimi one with Tobey Maguire. That was like, I just remember that one scene where he's like emo. He's got his hair dyed black and it's like over one eye, and he's just like almost felt like jumping the shark already, even though I didn't really think it jumped the shark till Spider-Man 3, but
yeah. Totally. He was ahead of his time. So that's a big success for Marvel. And then later in the 60s, in 1968, the first Marvel acquisition, change of control happens when Goodman decides to sell out, and he sells the company to the Perfect Film and Chemical Corporation, which was later renamed Cadence Industries. And Marvel then became one of their subsidiaries, or underneath one of their subsidiaries, called the Magazine Management Company. Very generic. Yeah, very generic.
Honestly, when I was reading through some of this, it felt like a laundry list of incredibly generic conglomerate names.
Well, I guess that's the thing when you're looking at a company that goes back like almost 80 years.
Right.
And in a fun twist of foreshadowing, in the 1970s, when Marvel's owned by Cadence, they actually strike a licensing deal with Lucasfilm, and they published the Star Wars comic books in the 70s and 80s.
Wow, that's wild. Because to me, like, we've got a trilogy going on here, and Pixar was actually owned by Lucasfilm in the early days, and Lucasfilm and Marvel had a licensing agreement in the early days. And it's like, it's kind of amazing they all ended up under one roof and had this kind of joint history along the way.
Yeah, if only Steve Jobs were somehow involved. That should have been our lie.
That's right.
That would have been fun. So listeners, you know that Steve Jobs was not involved in Marvel. So in 1986, Marvel changes hands again, and Cadence sells the company to New World Entertainment, the media company. And then New World undergoes some struggles and ends up selling it again shortly later to the billionaire Ronald Perlman in 1989 for $82.5 million. And in another fun bit of foreshadowing of what's to come, Perlman gives a quote at the time. He says, it being Marvel, is a, quote, mini Disney in terms of intellectual property. Disney's got much more highly recognized characters and softer characters, whereas our characters are termed action heroes. But at Marvel, we are now in the business of the creation and marketing of characters.
Boy, does that sound familiar.
Sounds super familiar. So Perlman's pretty ambitious, and he shortly thereafterward actually ends up taking Marvel public, and it becomes a public company, and then he starts expanding. And so he took it public in 1991, and then in 1992, they actually buy the sports trading card company Fleer in 1992. And then in 1993, Marvel acquires slightly less than half of a company called Toy Biz, which was a toy company that they also had a licensing deal with to create action figures for all the Marvel superheroes and villains. And
it's really interesting. They keep like vertically integrating and then unbundling, and vertically integrating and then unbundling. And it's interesting how like they kind of fluidly move throughout partnerships and ownership of, their core asset being the characters, and then moving in and out of publishing and distribution and merchandising and all those different
adjacent, or in the case of baseball cards, not so adjacent businesses.
Yeah, I would love to see the prospectus on that pickup.
Yeah, what the rationale? Well, and that was in the middle of the baseball card bubble, which we will come back to again in one sec. But Toy Biz also will be important in the future. So they don't buy all of Toy Biz. They just buy slightly less than half a share of the company. And so things go along, and then a couple of years later, in kind of 95, 96 time frame, things aren't looking so good for Marvel. So they've expanded a lot. The core comic book business, actually, there was a big bubble in comic books in the mid 90s, which, doing the research for the show, I kind of like vaguely remembered. But even more so, in 1994, Major League Baseball went on strike. And this was like a huge thing. And, people thought this was the death of baseball, but it wasn't, happily for baseball, but it was definitely the beginning of the death of the baseball card industry. And
absolutely.
Fleer suffered huge losses when this happened.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that was so I'm an Indians fan, grew up in Cleveland. That was the first year Jacobs Field was open, and they didn't get a full season in there.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that, man. Yeah. I remember that strike so vividly. And wasn't, I remember, and obviously being, a Seattle podcast, I was a huge, even though I didn't live in Seattle at the time, huge Ken Griffey Jr. fan. And, I think I remember he was on pace to like shatter the home run record that year. And then the strike was, the season was shortened by the strike.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right. Cause I think, I remember that the Indians were really good too. And we were in the World Series the next year, and sort of growing up, I always thought like, well, it's weird that like the Indians had this new ballpark in 94. And I think we actually played 95 in the ALCS, or the division series, is when we played the Mariners, and Griffey was obviously instrumental in that. But I remember thinking, like, how did we have a new ballpark in 94 but get into the World Series in 95? And it didn't really occur to me till I was later, later in the 90s, like, oh, duh, there was no playoffs in 94.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine like that, if that happened with the NFL now, like, oh yeah, there's no Super Bowl.
Yeah, totally. It was terrible. And like, I was such a huge baseball fan growing up, and it was really a black mark on the sport.
Yeah.
So, Marvel's not doing so good. People are speculating, the company's in trouble. Maybe it'll end up filing for bankruptcy.
Do you know why there was a comic book bubble? Like, what were other than the whole like Fleer thing, what were the externalities creating the struggle for Marvel?
I don't know. I didn't do enough research on this. I wonder if it was related to just the whole, the baseball card bubble, which is probably even bigger of a bubble. I mean, I was a huge baseball card collector, as were so many of my friends at that point in time, and still in my parents' basement have boxes and boxes full of baseball cards that are now worthless. That the market just got flooded. And I wonder if a similar dynamic was playing out in the comic book industry.
I could see that.
Yeah. So there's all this speculation about the future of Marvel, and comic book villain, as Ben referred to him in the intro, Carl Icahn, takes notice, and he and his firm start buying up some of the debt that Marvel had with public companies, even with private companies. If you have debt that often trades, other people, not the people who loaned you the money, can then sell the debt to other people. And folks like Carl Icahn, this is a big part of their playbook, is they buy debt in companies that they think are troubled, and with the hopes that they're hoping that the company ends up filing for bankruptcy, and then in court as debtors they can end up taking control of the company. The not so charitable term for this in the industry is loan to own.
Or comic book villain.
Yeah, or being a comic book villain. So this all starts playing out in the press, and then at the end of 1996 in December, Marvel does end up filing for bankruptcy, and so this all goes to court. And in early 1997, the court rules that Carl Icahn can indeed take control of the company, and he does. So Carl Icahn, comic book villain, is now head of Marvel.
It honestly sounds like a Lex Luthor move.
It totally does. The only thing that would make this better is if Carl Icahn were also CEO of DC Comics.
It's true. It's true. But alas, this is probably a good time to... our listeners are I'm sure they figured out by now. Carl Icahn is true. The Fleer thing is true. The CEO of DC owning a large number of shares in Marvel is false.
That is false. So Carl Icahn now has control of Marvel, but there's just one problem. Carl Icahn didn't own all of the debt. There are actually big Wall Street banks that had also loaned Marvel a lot of money, and they still wanted their money back. So the court case wasn't over, and the company still needed to officially reorganize and exit bankruptcy. So this is where Toy Biz ends up coming back into the picture. This toy action figure company, and it turns out it was owned by this guy named Isaac Perlmutter, who was an Israeli American, and he ends up proposing a new plan to the creditors of Marvel that involves Toy Biz putting up money and paying back the creditors, and then taking control of the company away from Carl Icahn. And the creditors and the courts actually decide to go along with this plan. So control of Marvel gets wrested away from the villain. It's like the comic book, happy ending, and the superhero Isaac Perlmutter comes in to save the day. And Isaac actually still to this day is CEO of Marvel.
Oh, that's a great story.
Even post acquisition.
All right, so what happens to Toy Biz then? How does that?
So Toy Biz gets folded into Marvel, I believe, and becomes part of the combined company.
So then, at this point, Marvel owns the IP to the characters, and has a merchandising division to actually sell the toys themselves.
Yep, I believe that's right. But it's still not like it's not a Disney scale.
Right.
Consumer products division.
Right.
So in the meantime, something even more important for the future of Marvel happens, and that's that I believe for a long time they'd been making various types of films and movies about the franchises, but films based on Marvel franchises actually start to kind of catch on with the public and become pretty big movies. And it actually starts, I did not realize this, in 1997, that year when Men in Black comes out. Men in Black apparently was a Marvel franchise. I had no idea.
Oh, no way. Because I knew there were comic books, but I always assumed it was one of those like after the movie comics.
No, it was a Marvel franchise. And,
wow.
And then God, I watched that movie so many times when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones was great.
Absolutely. Heroes.
So Men in Black comes out the first Men in Black comes out in 1997.
And this was before Marvel Studios, right? This was Marvel IP.
So this was exactly. Marvel was licensing their IP to big movie studios, to Fox, to Sony, to Time Warner, who were making these movies, big budget movies. Blade, 1998, and then the first really big one, X-Men, in the year 2000.
That's right.
And Spider-Man in 2002. So again, Marvel's not making these movies themselves, but obviously is noticing that, collectively these movies are making billions of dollars. Really
starting to take off. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about, like, there had been superhero movies for decades, right? I mean, like, we had a whole franchise of Batman movies. It's not
Superman
like
Superman movies.
That's right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Christopher Reeve, who could forget? Yep. It's not like we were new to this, but like in the world today of like, or even 2009, Iron Man grossed $580 million within Marvel Studios. Like, it wasn't that scale yet. It wasn't like every single blockbuster at the box office is going to be a superhero film. So it's interesting to think about, like, what changed that like all of a sudden caused these superhero movies to become more and more of a sure thing for the studios to make.
Yeah, I don't know. And it also kind of coincided. Well, I think the Superman and the Batman movies were always, at least I remember kind of growing up thinking about, like, oh yeah, like I remember the Batman movies. when I was a kid. But I think it was just those two were like the big franchises, the DC franchises, and DC, I believe not always, but for certainly through all of these decades was owned by Time Warner and still is. So they were part of a big major media company and had the resources to make these, big budget movies. Whereas Marvel, I don't think ever did until this era. And so you see these superhero franchises that had been obviously had huge followings, but weren't like the mainstream, to the extent that Superman and Batman were, now get these big film slates. I think the other thing that was happening is this is sort of the dawn, and I don't know how much one led to the other, sort of the dawn of like sequelitis in Hollywood. And superhero movies, of course, franchises lend themselves so well to sequels.
Yep, very true. I mean, as ever since 1939, every single one of these comic book franchises has issue after issue after issue. They're
serials.
Yep.
So it's perfect for in a world where Hollywood needs dependable franchises to make sequels. What better place to look to than comic books?
Yep.
So in 2005, after a few of these huge successful movies based on Marvel IP have come out from other studios, Marvel actually takes a really ambitious step to start Marvel Studios to make movies themselves, and so they raise $525 million in debt in a credit facility from Merrill Lynch. Ironically, like right before Merrill Lynch went bankrupt in the recession, but they get a film financing vehicle from Merrill and create the first kind of major independent Hollywood studio since kind of the DreamWorks era. This was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think that that this was something they just sort of started and ultimately became like very quickly the largest part of their business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So and also interesting, they sort of, when they announced this, this was in 2005, 2006, when they were getting this set up, they announced that the plan was that they were going to release individual films of individual franchises, Iron Man and the Hulk, which were the first two movies that they end up releasing, create these franchises, and then they were going to tie them all together into a crossover film. So, which obviously they did under Disney.
The Avengers.
Yes, exactly. But that was the plan all along. And interesting that Disney really, has been hands off and let them operate that plan.
Yeah. And thinking about in making this move and starting the studio, they'd already licensed out so many of their characters to other studios for to make films and distribute. And so when you think about
they're really their top tier characters.
Right. So I'll list the characters that were no longer eligible for Marvel to make their own films around: Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, Wolverine, the rest of the X-Men, Deadpool. There's others, but when you think about like, wow, okay, so all those are off limits, and what they've got is sort of like the second tier at the time. Like, we don't think of them now because they're huge, gigantic blockbuster wins, but like Thor, Hulk, Iron Man, like that's who they're left to work with, and then that's what they create the studio around.
Totally. And Iron Man was really that was really the best that they had available, and that was the first film that they made, and it came out in early 2008, and it ended up being tour de force from Robert Downey Jr. I remember seeing it in theaters. Such a great movie, the original Iron Man.
Absolutely. And actually the year before, I think that was 2009, and in 2008 they had the Hulk, which was about half of what that film grossed. But that was
they actually both came out in 2008. They came out they made them concurrently. Iron Man actually came out a couple months before Hulk, I believe, at least according to Wikipedia, and which is always right. And Iron Man made $585 million at the box office, so almost $600 million, which is compared to films like The Avengers and, Iron Man 3, and Frozen and other Disney movies, and certainly The Force Awakens that make $1 billion or even close to $2 billion. That doesn't sound like a lot, but at the time that was a huge amount, even though it was only a few years ago.
That's the beginning of an era.
Beginning of the superhero blockbuster era.
That's right, and it sort of signals to like any potential buyer of Marvel stock, like there's a new way to value this company, and it's based on these numbers and has nothing to do with any of the other lines of business they're in.
Yep. So as you mentioned, the Hulk comes out shortly thereafter and isn't the huge success that Iron Man is, but it's a pretty successful movie. Makes just under $300 million, and is very successful, and kind of proves that audiences are interested in this kind of content and will come out even for, non-top tier characters if you can make good movies. So the next year in 2009, before I believe there were intended to be 5 films on the slate that Marvel did with Merrill Lynch, but before any of the following ones can come out, August 31st, 2009, blockbuster deal. Bob Iger and Walt Disney Company announced that they're going to acquire Marvel for $4.2 billion, which was quite a lot when you think back to when Perlman bought Disney. Granted, it was in the late 80s, but it was
out of bankruptcy court.
No, Perlman bought it.
90s.
Perlman bought it from in the late 80s from New World Entertainment. It was less than $100 million. So here we are, sort of 20 years later, and we're talking $4.2 billion.
Yep. And it's interesting that there was not a single new piece of intellectual property that mattered between those years.
Yeah.
Like all those characters had already been created, and it was really all about a new way to leverage that same intellectual property that made it 40 plus times more valuable over that span of time.
Yeah. Super interesting. I mean, it really was the films.
Yeah. And to place to kind of for listeners out there, a 29% premium was what was paid for Marvel above what it was currently trading at. So while there was some scrutiny, like, oh my God, that's a huge, $4.24 billion. That's a huge, ridiculous acquisition. It's not that much more than what the public markets were valuing it at, and it actually is pretty much in line with other public company acquisitions that we've covered on this show.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that's important to think about this deal, that I think other folks who've written about it now and talked about it kind of lose context of a little bit. This was in the middle of the recession. This was like perfect timing by Iger and Disney to buy Marvel, because people were worried at this point, and we were talking about box office numbers a minute ago. They were certainly depressed by the fact that we were in the middle of the recession, and people didn't have nearly as much disposable income as they were used to having earlier in the decade.
That's right. And for even more perspective, it was just over half the price that they paid 3 years before for Pixar. So if you kind of look at this trend, they hadn't yet acquired Lucasfilm, but let's simplify Disney to a content and distribution company, and they're basically out buying content. The part 2 of their, the second big pickup that they made here, they signaled that they were going to do this before. This was Iger's strategy, and it clearly had been working with Pixar.
Yeah. And I mean, the Pixar, famously, Bob Iger's first board meeting as CEO, which was, I think, his second day on the job, he proposed to the board that he wanted to buy Pixar. And this was clearly how he kind of set the tone for his tenure as CEO. And he's, certainly hard to argue with his execution across the 3 of these companies.
Right. And it's if you're Disney and you're looking around and it's, 2005, all the valuable content that you don't own, that's some of it's in Universal and some of it's there's little pieces and pockets elsewhere. But the 3 other big powerhouses are Lucasfilm, Pixar, and Marvel. And, went in and over how many years? 2006 to 2012. So over 6 years, rolled them all up.
Well, and, also, in keeping with the theme of the show, or half of the theme of the show now in acquisitions, Iger took over as CEO of Disney right after there had been this hostile takeover attempt of Disney that actually Comcast, right before Iger became CEO, launched a hostile takeover attempt to try and buy Disney. And of course, later, 5 or 6 years later, they would end up acquiring NBC. But this was like, I have to imagine that living through that, the Disney board and Bob Iger and kind of entering his tenure, thinking about seeing consolidation in the media industry coming, and very actively deciding to be a consolidator as opposed to a consolidatee, and looking around to see what they could buy.
Yeah, and you look at the what that aggressive strategy helped them do. I mean, who was competing with Disney in 2005, and who's even close to competing with them now? I mean, I think that it just totally worked.
Yeah, interestingly, Iger actually said in kind of the press quote at the time of the Marvel deal. He said, Marvel's brand and its treasure trove of content will now benefit from our extraordinary reach. We paid a price that reflects the value they've created and the value we can create as one company. It's a full price, but a fair price. And absolutely, we talked about this in the Pixar episode and especially in the Lucasfilm episode, but, Disney's core competency and what they have that the other media companies don't have is that flywheel that that Walt Disney drew back in the early days of the company, which is the ability to take great IP franchises like Star Wars, like Pixar, like Marvel, and pump them through the flywheel and realize much more value out of it than they could on their own.
That's right. And old school Disney was creating it, but new school Disney has pretty efficiently figured out how to bring in content they don't create into that flywheel too.
Yep.
And I think the fourth piece of this stool that we haven't talked about yet because it wasn't an acquisition is the tremendous growth of the ESPN business inside of Disney. And I think the four of those businesses together really account for a lot of the growth and the dramatic change in share price between then and today.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. I mean, I hadn't thought about ESPN in this context, but you bringing it up and in the context of the flywheel.
Well, I guess actually Disney was an acquisition. It was just a long time ago.
Or ESPN. Yeah. It was through a pretty complicated history. That might be a fun show to do sometime.
Yeah.
ESPN has a super interesting corporate history. But the core ESPN business, I think in a lot of ways, I mean, it was totally the golden egg for many, many years for Disney, but I think is much more challenged today than it was a few years ago with cord cutting and linear television watching being much less of a thing. And obviously SportsCenter is still popular among many people, but I used to watch SportsCenter every day, probably multiple times a day, and I haven't watched it in years now, even though I still watch clips on Snapchat. But you see this strategy, and especially around film with ESPN2 now with 30 for 30 and some of the investments they're making there. Think about the OJ documentary and how great and ambitious that was.
You're totally getting into my tech themes.
All right. Well, we'll stop now.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to tell you about a longtime friend of the show, Vanta. AI has scrambled the whole security picture. It used to be that you proved that you were secure once a year, an audit or a static PDF, then everyone would nod and you're done. But in an AI-first world, that doesn't hold up anymore.
Yep, your risk surface changes every week now. A vendor turns on an AI feature or someone writes in a new model without telling IT, and your posture is different than it was last week, let alone at your last audit. Vanta's own research found that around 70% of companies have this quote-unquote shadow AI running with no security review at all.
Right. And that's where Vanta comes in. They're the leading agentic trust platform, meaning they've built the thing that closes the gap. And the way that they close that gap is Vanta Agent. Think of it as a GRC engineer, that's governance, risk, and compliance, except that it's software and it doesn't sleep. It finds the issues, drafts the fixes, and cuts the time that you'd spend on vendor assessments in half.
in half, which is exactly why more than 16,000 companies today run on Vanta. Companies like Ramp, Cursor, and Snowflake all stay audit ready and catch the risks that crop up between audits across every vendor, every AI tool, the whole environment.
And that's the real value. Trust has to be continuous now, which is why Vanta automates your security, your compliance, and the work to earn and prove trust. We're huge fans of Vanta over here, and literally hundreds of acquired listeners have become Vanta customers at their companies over the years. So you can get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/acquired. That's VANTA.com/acquired for $1,000 off, and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
And you want to move on to acquisition category?
Yeah, let's do. But first, just to wrap up quickly on the aftermath of the acquisition. So, as we mentioned, Perlmutter remains the CEO of the company. The company stays in New York, so it's a fully autonomous subsidiary within Disney. And like we said, basically they've just continued to execute on the plan that they drew up in 2005 when they launched Marvel Studios.
And producing dramatically more. Like their scale now, I mean, they had like 5 or 6 in the pipeline when they were acquired. But I think you look at the pace of new Marvel movies coming out and new Marvel movies planned through the next few years, like they're not letting up.
Yep. And even, so there's much more value to be realized from the company in the future. But even since the acquisition in 2009, the Marvel movies have generated almost $9 billion in revenue, in box office revenue, which is crazy. Now, that doesn't necessarily certainly doesn't equal profits, and profits for movies are harder to get to than pure revenue. We can get that data.
I think Marvel estimated profit margins, at least in the first 8 films released, I actually pulled the stat, under Disney, were about a 23% profit margin.
Okay, so you call roughly sort of $2 billion-ish, slightly more than $2 billion in profit so far from the movies. So that's half the purchase price right there, and that's just the box office. Right. Not the home video, not the merchandising, not the theme parks, all that stuff. So
totally. And I grabbed another stat. I think this is from, Fortune article in 2015. One analyst said that by the time it was finished with the Avengers, Iron Man 3, and Captain America and Thor sequels, Disney probably paid for the acquisition of the entire company. So I think it's a pretty quick payback period there. And I think looking at that 22% profit margin, and you look at the price tag of production now on these films, pretty expensive to make these huge blockbusters.
Yeah. Well, you
like
need
200 million, 150 million.
Yeah, you need well. We should delay some of this discussion till we render our final grade. But
all right.
Let's jump into category. So, as a reminder, we Pixar, which was our very first episode on this show, we said it was a business line, and then Lucasfilm we said was a product. So, what is Marvel?
Yeah, so I am going to foreshadow my my tech themes and my conclusion a little bit here, but I think it was 2 things. One is a business line. They bought the business line of making the films. They were able to scale that. We talked about kind of paying back the acquisition in a shortish amount of time. The studio itself, but ultimately they have this asset in perpetuity of the characters. And unlike, in my opinion, the reason why we didn't have asset yet in this categorization for Pixar, but Pixar sequels don't hold up as well as the serialization that comic book characters lend themselves to. Unlike a lot of sequels which fatigue very often, there's these like few in the world, the James Bonds of the world that don't get tired because they're able to kind of keep reinventing it, or the stories are okay being formulaic, so you kind of can keep experiencing the same tight plot line over and over again. Superheroes let themselves do that, and the intellectual property that I'm calling separate from the business line, the intellectual property that is these characters are they're a true asset in perpetuity.
Yeah, interesting. Foreshadowing one of my tech themes a little bit too, but I was going to be lazy on this one and say, oh yeah, totally a product, just like Lucasfilm, and being, I think we called Lucasfilm the sort of juice that gets pumped through the pipeline of the flywheel. And I thought that this is too, and I still think it is. But it's an interesting insight on the serializability of superheroes and the assets of superheroes versus a Pixar, which, as great as Pixar is, and
I'm not excited for another Toy Story.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a harder business in a lot of ways because you're betting on the capability of the team to keep producing new, original, great stuff.
Right. It's like your assets depreciate faster.
Yep. Or there is no, I mean, they do sequels at Pixar, but that's not the core of what it is. It's like you have to keep generating keep pushing the rock up the hill each time.
Right. And actually, it's funny if you look at the, I was about to make the point that, it is more expensive to create a Pixar film, because you don't have the same reusability that you do from the nth, superhero film. It actually is, the profit margin on Pixar films are higher. So to kind of combat the point I just made, 23% profit margins for Marvel, 27% profit margins for Pixar. And render farms and illustrators are expensive, but not as expensive as flying helicopters into buildings.
Yeah. And not that Pixar pays actors a lot too for their voice, but
yeah,
I would imagine probably in aggregate in terms of money paid to actors, Pixar movies, I would have to imagine are less than a Marvel movie.
Yeah, I would think.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the asset categorization. I mean, I think it is definitely also juice to pump through Disney's flywheel.
Totally.
But it is a different kind of asset than certainly Pixar. And I think in a lot of ways, Star Wars too. Star Wars is kind of like, tellingly, I called it Star Wars, Lucasfilm.
You can just call it Star Wars.
Yeah, but it is Star Wars, right? Whereas Marvel is many of these franchises.
Right. Oh yeah, I mean that's a great point. It's like if you look at the $4 billion price tag for Lucasfilm and the $4.2 billion price tag for Marvel, like think how many more characters. It's like 800 plus characters, or I think 500 plus at the time of acquisition in the Marvel universe, and maybe 50 of which are recognizable by the American public.
Yep.
And you look at Star Wars, and I don't think Lucasfilm was sort of valuing themselves based on all those deep characters. And what we're seeing with the Disney powerhouses, they're sort of trying to make the Star Wars universe more serializable and more kind of disparate with all these different stories that they're trying to tell that aren't with our favorite characters. And I'll be really interested to see not how Rogue One does, because I think that's going to be, there's so much pent up demand for Star Wars that like I want to see how the third or fourth non-core Star Wars story does, and if Disney will be successful in kind of creating this sort of serial blockbuster out of Lucasfilm characters the same way they've been able to with Marvel characters.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about these three acquisitions, which are obviously all fall within the same, broad theme for Disney, but on a kind of spectrum from Pixar, where it's so much about the people and the creative process and creating individual new creative works, to then kind of Lucasfilm sort of in the middle, where it's about the one franchise of Star Wars, and the cadence around that is, before the acquisition was very long cycles between any sort of new Star Wars content that would come out, and it's much faster now.
Right. Like multiple decades.
Yep. And Lucasfilm is sort of about the people, I mean, obviously there's George Lucas, and some great leadership at Lucasfilm. But also, about the franchise. And then you've got Marvel at the other end of the spectrum, which has had great business leadership, especially under Isaac Perlmutter, but, all of the talent that comes into the making the movies, and even the artists of the comic books, like it's all third parties, you know.
Right.
It's not like it's kind of it's very different from Pixar.
Yeah. Great point.
Interesting. All right. Should we move on to what would have happened otherwise?
Would have happened otherwise? Yeah. So, I think Marvel was going to get acquired. Like, we were in an era of consolidation where distribution was buying content.
Yep.
And I don't know who else it would have been. 20th Century Fox, Sony. Seems like actually there's a lot of places they could have landed. It's kind of shocking to me that with the Pixar pickup in 2006 that someone else didn't see this coming and try to make a play for it sooner. Did maybe other studios, or I guess
especially the other I wonder if the other studios maybe
just
were a little bit lazy in their thinking, because they were kind of having their cake and eating it too, right? In that they were getting Marvel movies in Spider-Man and in X-Men without having to actually buy the company. And it was only when Marvel started making movies on their own that it became a really valuable company as itself.
Yeah, that's true. And it really hadn't been long since Marvel Studios was around. The shocking thing is, like, how did no one else? I mean, actually, here's kind of an interesting question. If you're 20th Century Fox, or if you are Sony Pictures, and you see, let's say you could see the future and know that Disney was going to do this, do you try to do it sooner? Like, did people, A, not think Disney was going to do it, or B, not care that Disney was going to do it?
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting thing that we haven't talked about yet so far, but on the surface, this actually wasn't the most natural fit with Disney. Which actually I think is one of the reasons why Bob Iger and Disney really wanted to do this acquisition. But Disney was always, kind of like princesses and animated movies, and then Pixar, which definitely fit into that mold. In terms of their strategy with children, super gender stereotypes here, but I think this is the way at least historically, a lot of people at Disney have thought about this, and in the media industry, that Disney owned little girls, but they didn't, and little boys too, but they didn't have
to a much lesser extent,
and that this was Disney's play for little boys too. I mean, what's more attractive to little boys than superheroes? In total, old school gender stereotyped ways. Speaking as a massive Frozen fan myself.
Right. I still haven't seen it.
You got to change that. It's so good.
I know. As a admitted Pixar fanboy, I really should. Not that it's Pixar, but to see how that's entered the rest of the Disney umbrella.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think too. I can't imagine this had that much impact on Perlmutter and Marvel, because they were much more business executives than sort of founder creative types. But Iger and Disney have developed this reputation now with these 3 acquisitions as excellent stewards of franchises. They're kind of like the Warren Buffetts of creative content and businesses.
Right.
When
I think in the Pixar animation, I think it was the Pixar. No, in the Lucasfilm acquisition, we compared it to Facebook. That Disney was really good at leaving their sort of disparate brands
creative
that
direction
they acquire on their own.
Which again, a little bit was why it didn't. On the surface, it was wow, Disney buying Marvel. Marvel's much edgier than Disney, but they've let it be totally separate. But this was in the Lucasfilm acquisition. George Lucas said to Bob Iger before he sold, if I'm going to sell it, I would only sell this to you and to Disney. And Steve Jobs too, right? It's hard to imagine Pixar and Jobs selling to anybody except Disney.
Right. Yeah. So two other questions here then for you that I would pose. One, is there a fourth? Will we see Disney make a play for another large piece of content? and I've been sort of racking my brain to think who that could be, or who is the content that we don't think of as the big content yet, as the up and comer. And then two, while you're sort of noodling on that, I generalize this to distribution. Combined distribution content company buying more content and pumping it through their distribution. Do we see that in other verticals? Like, are we seeing that in tech outside of entertainment, or any other forms of content being bought by distribution plus content companies?
Interesting questions. Well, on the second, I mean, to a certain extent, I think we see it a little bit with Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it's very different. Like, I think Instagram would have grown hugely on its own. But no question that on the ad sales side of the house, being able to just plug in Facebook ad sales into Instagram was hugely valuable there. On the first question, I'm not close enough to have a super informed opinion on that front, but one thing that just popped into my mind, especially because the company is struggling a bit now, what about Nintendo?
Boy, that's like you're right, that is like the another huge treasure trove of IP that, as we saw with Pokemon Go, I mean, you take an existing piece of technology, or relatively existing with Niantic, and slap highly valuable IP like Nintendo's on top of it, and you can create something, that the world goes crazy for. We can have a debate on how lasting that is, but.
Yep. But certainly the IP that Nintendo has in Mario and Zelda, and so, even, I mean, they're in a lot of ways, like, the parallels to Marvel are very similar. You've got lesser known stuff like Kid Icarus and, and then you've got Pokemon, obviously, which is super well known. Man, what would, if all of that IP were liberated from the challenged business model of, like, gaming console hardware sales?
Right.
Yeah, what could you do with it?
And this is interesting, like, almost all of this, probably excluding Pixar, but at this point, Pixar is a little kind of an older company too. Like, what IP is super valuable and a major part of the American consciousness and new? Because all this is like, buying the Star Wars stuff from 1977 and buying the Marvel stuff from the 40s and 50s and buying Nintendo from the 80s. Like, where is, where's 2010's Mario? And, like, does that exist in the era of the internet and shortened attention spans and social media, where individuals are their own content creators and content is short-lived?
Yeah, well, maybe it lives on Facebook.
Yeah, and it's like, it's funny, like, and all the rumors of maybe Disney buying Twitter, and then that sort of fell through, probably because of pricing issues. Like, none of these platforms own the IP. There's, like, shared licenses between the tweet and the and between Twitter and the originator of the content. But, like, it's hard to think of new intellectual property that everyone cares about. Like, everyone cares about their little filter bubble of content.
Or I think about, or like Twitch too, right? Like,
right.
All the big entertainment franchises of the last 5 years, certainly. I think you would, they're apps, right? They're not IP themselves. They're platforms.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all the major value in the recent stuff is the platform on which massively distributed, democratized IP is created and distributed, not actually being a content powerhouse.
Yep.
Other than, actually, we are seeing this with Netflix, right? Netflix, Amazon, they have the distribution, and we're previously licensing the content, and now we're creating content in-house. And that's a pretty good allegory for sort of question number 2 there of who else is doing this these days outside of Disney.
Yep.
And I guess Netflix isn't necessarily buying up other companies that have content, but we are seeing heavy investment by the people that have the pipes in creating their own content.
Yep. Well, actually, there are plenty of IP franchises out there being created, and great ones. I should have thought of this. Jenny and I, with my parents, over Thanksgiving weekend, went to see Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which
Harry Potter,
we loved. But yeah, Harry Potter, of course. Another,
yeah, totally, and that's the last couple decades or decade and a half,
or at least younger than some of these other franchises that that Disney's been buying.
Yeah, maybe that's not a fair.
But also, that was really created, not pre-internet, but certainly pre-social media, and the first Harry Potter. I don't think J.K. Rowling or Harry could have, peered into the future and seen the world that we'd live in today.
Yeah, absolutely not.
In fact, Ben and I both got iPhone 7s recently, and one of the, I don't use it a ton, but just one of the sort of delightful features on it that I enjoyed discovering is the live photos, the Harry Potter photos.
Yeah, right. It's kind of for those of us who are on the off cycle, or I guess the on cycle, and didn't have the 6. I just discovered live photos too, and you're like, whoa. These are weird when I send them to people, and they can get way too much context.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to thank our longtime friend of the show, ServiceNow. If you are running a large enterprise, AI agents are likely spread across every team, and deploying them is no longer the hard part.
Yeah. The hard part is knowing what permissions they have, what employees are using them for, or what decisions AI is making. AI security for an enterprise at scale is not a small concern. Like, the risks are real.
Exactly. And the challenge with AI is governing it, securing it, measuring it, and making sure that it actually delivers value. That is why ServiceNow built the AI Control Tower.
Yep. AI Control Tower gives enterprises a single place to see, manage, govern, and optimize AI across the entire business. And it works with any AI, not just theirs. Every device on your network, every permission across every system, every AI agent visible and secure in one place.
And ServiceNow can do this because they've spent more than 20 years building the operational backbone of the enterprise, the workflows, governance, approvals, security controls, and institutional knowledge that power how work actually gets done across IT, HR, customer service, finance, and security.
ServiceNow already runs more than 100 billion workflows annually and trillions of transactions for more than 85% of the Fortune 500. So when companies need a place to govern AI at enterprise scale, they're building on a platform at the center of how their business already operates.
And in a future that isn't going to be one AI, it's going to be thousands of AI agents working across every function of the company. But the question is, who's managing them all?
So if you're trying to turn AI ambition into real business outcomes and make it work safely, securely, at scale, go check out servicenow.com/acquired and tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right. Should we move into tech themes?
Yeah, totally. So the one I've got one that's based on a stat. So of the top 10 grossing films in 1981, 7 of them were original content. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Arthur, Stripes, Cannonball Run, Chariots of Fire, Four Seasons, Time Bandits. You've got one that's an adaptation, On Golden Pond, and then you have 2 sequels, Superman 2 and For Your Eyes Only.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to 2011, so 3 decades later.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read you the top 10 grossing films. Harry Potter 8, Transformers 3, Twilight Saga 4, Hangover Part 2, Pirates of the Caribbean 4, Fast 5, Cars 2, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Thor, Captain America. So that is 8 sequels, 2 adaptations, and 0 original pieces of content.
Yeah, all of them franchises.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to see the shift of the playground that is the movie studio, the movie theater, the whole, all of Hollywood as a feature film production. The creativity and originality is it's not happening there anymore. It's happening elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And we're in this era right now simultaneously of a great TV renaissance. There's every season there's like brilliant dramas on with, Hollywood acclaimed actors and best in class writing. And, there was Mad Men, there was The Sopranos. Mm-hmm. Like, we're leading up to this, and I'll say if there's one I'm watching that's my Carve Out that I don't want to mention yet. But like, all of the experimentation has moved to cheaper things, TV or, YouTube or social media. And Hollywood is the way to go and make $1 billion off of sure things, because if you're going to go pour a couple $100 million in, you want to get big money out, and you're not willing to take a chance.
Yep. It's interesting. I think that the question for me that begs, and I've been thinking about even starting to do the research, and as we've been doing the episode, for all the justifiable admiration, deserved admiration that I think we're heaping on Marvel and Disney here, I think there is one really key existential risk, and that's, if and when the pushback to this dynamic comes from the public, how many sequels, and people have been asking this for years, and so maybe it'll never come, but how many sequels can we take? How long are superhero movies going to be in vogue? Is this just a very extended fad cycle that we've been living in? Like in 10, 20, 30 years, will we look back on this and feel like, man, that was like Leisure Suits. Like, remember the superhero movie days,
Yeah.
And I just wonder, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to it.
Well, yeah. And I guess it's interesting to if this is like a permanent thing, what changed in the world that, what piece of technology or what societal norm shift or something changed that made it so that, maybe it's this, maybe we're actually capable of creating something that resonates so strongly with people's nostalgia. And we're actually capable of creating multiple billions of dollars of revenue on a single film. Therefore, we're going to spend all the money to produce that thing. Therefore, we're not going to take chances.
Yeah.
And it's
and producing those films costs hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. So it's like maybe the technology got good enough, both in distribution and production, where it was possible to spend that much money on making a film, and it was possible to spend to earn that much from instant global distribution that we actually are seeing it come to fruition, and it was only technology limited before.
Yeah, and the flywheel like Disney of, consumer products and theme parks, and when you're investing in an IP as something, as an entity like Disney, that is a huge investment. You really can't and they do take risks, and have failed on stuff like what was that one? They had a couple live action movies that were total flops, like right around the time that they bought Marvel.
Which is interesting. They're taking big risks, but they're flopping. Right?
Yeah, right. But you can't afford to have too many of those flops.
Right. And I wonder if you get a few of those that are big risks that are flopping, and then you just get scared away from doing it.
Yeah.
And you start pushing all you're effectively prototyping down into cheaper distribution mediums.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I mean, where, as you said, there's so much innovation and a renaissance going on in the television format right now. Is there, or will there be something similar in the, film format? I mean, obviously there's independent film and there's lots of innovation going on. But not at the, kind of mass audience scale that something like Netflix and Amazon has allowed risks to be taken in television and still have the ability to a channel to distribute that to a mass audience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think sort of the same thing has happened with music, where there's like a psychological thing where we love the things that other people love, and we all love having the same darling and the same heroes, and like the same sort of music feels good to us that feels good to the other people around us. And with global distribution happening so quickly and so cheaply, you have the ability to achieve much more sameness and have much more people agree on what the best thing is. And we like to think that we have independent taste, but a lot of the time we're sort of just like looking to hear from people like, oh, what's the best, who's the Taylor Swift right now?
Yep.
And that's why we're getting so many fewer. It's like there didn't, except for like the Beatles, like there was never like the Beyonce, the Taylor Swift. They were much more distributed, and there were many more people that could make it big. And now there's like this echelon of people that you can count on one hand who are like these super phenomenas. Yep. And I think the same thing's sort of happening in movies.
Yep. And this totally leads super well into my tech theme, which is something I've been thinking about. I've been reading this great book. It came out last year, I think, or a couple years ago, called Sapiens, by this guy Yuval Noah Harari, and it's a great book, and it's about it's sort of a biological time history of Homo sapiens, and how our species came to take over the world, basically. Even though there are no longer, but there were other species of the genus Homo, Neanderthals and many others, but Homo sapiens sort of quote unquote won, and you could argue now are destroying the planet, but certainly have taken over the planet. What like actually differentiates us from other Homo species and from the rest of the animal kingdom? And he argues that the primary thing is our ability to create and believe in fictions, he calls it, which are like, a reality is like, there is a lion over there, run, but a fiction is like, there is a company and there is a story, and this we are, the internet is a fiction, right? But like, it's not that it's not real, it's very real, but it's not something that any other species could comprehend, and so that kind of makes me think about like IP and exactly what we were just talking about. Like, as the internet has spread communication instantly and globally, are we seeing these major blockbuster franchises just continue to consolidate because of the power of these fictions? Yeah. It's a great point. Heady stuff for Marvel. True that. I highly recommend the book. Not my Carve Out for the week, but because I'm not done with it yet, but great book. Cool. You want to grade it? Let's do it. So, an interesting stat that I found when I was looking through all this, if you look at the first 8 films from Marvel post-acquisition and the first 8 from Pixar post-acquisition, Marvel made about $6 billion gross. Pixar made about $4.5 billion. Costs of creating them are fairly similar. The box office profit from Marvel is about $1.2 billion versus $600 million. So there's like this interesting thing where Marvel does phenomenally better at the box office. But over the long term, Marvel's home video sales are about $400 million and Pixar's are $1.6 billion. And there's an interesting thing that happens where with Pixar films, like people get attached to that one character and that one storyline, and they just continue to watch and buy that film forever. And when you look at the Marvel movies, like even just me thinking about like, what would I rather watch? Toy Story 3, which like, even though that's a sequel, like that has its own storyline that I can remember and I'm emotionally attached to, or like, do I care about owning or even like, buying and watching again on a streaming service or from Amazon, like Iron Man 2. And you can sort of see like that these serialization, films don't have lasting value or nearly as much as the Pixar ones do. And so I went back and listened, and I have an A, not an A+ for Pixar. And I think that it's fair for me to say Disney, great acquisition, almost a necessary one. We'd be sitting here saying like, you were fools not to buy Marvel, but it's an A- to me. It's not as good as the Pixar acquisition. And I think the characters are brilliant IP for a long time. I think they've basically already recouped the cost of that $4 billion outlay, and we'll see what they can do with the character intellectual property. Because unlike Pixar, that those already created assets on a shelf will just keep creating value for them with
the assets that they have from Marvel, from these characters and this intellectual property, they're going to have to keep pouring cash in to get cash out.
Yep. I think we found that same infographic that I was I had it copied in my notes, and I was looking at it too. Yeah, it's interesting too to think about our grading benchmark throughout the life of this show.
What, you mean Instagram?
Yeah, well, no, I was going to not the evolution of our benchmark.
Oh, yeah.
I think Instagram is still one of, if not the top on the benchmark, but I keep thinking about to Next, and I don't think you can argue that that's not the greatest acquisition of all time. When you create $1 trillion of value, it's hard to top that. But also makes me think a little bit about like as cool as much as we love, IP and these fictions and what I was just talking about in media and movies and these franchises, the value that you can create in technology is so much more. Like the leverage is so much higher than you can get from the media industry or really any other industry. This is why technology companies are so valuable. 13 people at Instagram can create many, many billions of value. You can't make Iron Man 3 with 13 people, or the Iron Man theme park.
And reiterating something we talked about last episode, last quarter, Facebook's operating margin went from 32% to 45% on the incredibly large revenues that they have as a mature company. Technology. That is why technology companies are worth so much. And you just can't pull a lever to make the 23% profit margin from these Marvel films into something, 1.5x that.
Yep. And of course there's a dark side to that too, as we also talked about on the Facebook, episode. You don't create nearly as many jobs when you're pulling that technology lever. But anyway, we're getting off track here. I agree on A-, and I think about it in terms of lasting impact to Disney, and sustainable value creation within Disney, and thinking about these three companies that they acquired, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm. I think in a lot of ways there is the most risks to the future value of Marvel. And it's in, will superhero, because it's a portfolio of superhero franchises, will superhero franchises continue to be as popular? I think so. They've been popular for 100 years, but how popular will they be? You're totally indexed to that. Lucasfilm is all about Star Wars. And Star Wars, you could argue you have even more risk indexed to that. However, you could probably also argue it is one of, if not the single most beloved franchise in the entire world of all time. So they were buying something very specific there. But then Pixar really was, they were buying a process and both a people and a process that they've applied to their whole film and creative business. So I think for both the reasons you said, Ben, and those reasons, I think Pixar needs to be rated higher than Marvel in this Disney trilogy. So I'm gonna go A- for Marvel.
Cool.
All right.
Follow-ups.
Follow-ups. One real quick follow-up. Spectacles have launched, and people think they're cool.
People do.
Snap Inc.
Would love if any listeners have them. Would love to hear your comments in Slack, or email us at acquiredfm@gmail.com.
We haven't made it to a vending machine yet.
No, and my God, Evan Spiegel is a product marketing genius. I think launching them in a custom vending machine in LA. And then that going away, and of course selling out immediately and having a huge line, and then popping one up. Where was the one in the kind of like Great Plains area, Tulsa, I think, and then on the Grand Canyon. And then once people are saying, where's it going to be next? Then having a store in New York City that just has the vending machine in the back of the store. Yeah. And I just wonder what's next. And maybe there's even something before this show goes live, but
spectacles in space.
Yeah, like doing everything right. Like you could totally see other companies being like, okay, we have to work with retailers to make sure there's enough of these things available, and it's totally just like demand generation at its finest, and brand building, and also the fact that, like, from all accounts, the product is right and has like a good use case, and people like enjoy using it and say it's good. Like, talk about controlling the message and really giving people confidence that they're onto something when they're about to go on this IPO roadshow.
Yeah. Super cool. I can't wait to try them.
Yep.
All right. Hot takes. This is less of a hot take and more of a congratulation to friends, but Hightower announced very, very recently, if not today as we're recording this, which is a startup in New York with lots of Seattle roots, that they are merging with VTS in a deal valued at $300 million.
Yeah, huge congratulations to Donald DeSantis and that whole team. Really, like, really cool story. Startup Weekend guys got together actually to gel as a team at a Startup Weekend. Moved to New York when it was very clear that to be in commercial real estate, they should be in New York. Really just nailed product market fit quickly, built a great team, and this is not the end. It's a reported estimated $300 million merger with their competitor, and the Wall Street Journal article that we'll link to likens it kind of to the Zillow Trulia merger.
Trulia, yeah.
But awesome to see it happen for that company.
Yeah, and great to have Startup Weekend alums. I mean, Startup Weekend's played as an organization and events such a huge role in Ben and my lives and careers, and whether it's Rover.com getting started at Startup Weekend, or Ben leading indirectly to us meeting, and our
heading up at
careers
PSL and
PSL and Madrona.
I've got a really gushing blog post about how awesome Startup Weekend is on my blog at some point if anybody actually wants to check that out. But should we move on to Carve Outs?
All right, Carve Outs.
Cool. So there's going to be some people who are like, I knew this is what he was going to say earlier on when I was hinting at this, but I am so into Westworld. It's a HBO show based on a Michael Crichton book, which then got turned into a movie in the 70s with Yul Brynner as a cowboy. And I don't want to say too much about it now, but if you like the concept of where is AI and robotics going, and you like really high production value entertainment, it's created by J.J. Abrams and Jonathan Nolan, who of course worked on all the recent Batman films and The Prestige and a bunch of great films. You got to watch it. It's so good. And I just signed up for HBO Now, and it's like trivially cheap, and you get a month free. So highly recommend it.
Technology and superheroes all in one.
Yep.
My carve out for the week, real quick. I don't think I've done this before on this show, but I should have, because I love it. Super cool app called Overdrive, which is a way to digitally, through an app and through your Kindle, connect with your local library and borrow ebooks and audiobooks from your local library, and then read them on your Kindle or on your smartphone, and listen to the audiobooks for free with your library membership. And I actually had started using this a few years ago, kind of forgot about it, and picked it up again earlier this year. And it's just like removing that little bit of friction to, not that ebooks are very expensive, but audiobooks are. I'm reading like 4 or 5 times as many books as I used to because of it. So highly recommend it. Go sign up at your local library, support your libraries, and use Overdrive.
True that.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to talk about one of our favorite companies, Statsig.
Yes, long-time acquired partner. There is a reason why the best product teams at companies like OpenAI and Notion, Atlassian, Figma, Rippling, Brex, and more rely on StatSig, whether they are iterating on their core product features or shipping AI-powered experiences at scale.
Yep. In the crazy speed of today's AI world, shipping fast is just table stakes now. It's basically trivial to build and deploy your app constantly. The real advantage is how quickly you learn what changes actually created value for customers and how fast you can use that signal to guide what you ship next. Whether it's a feature tweak, a pricing change, a performance improvement, or an AI update like a model change or prompt adjustment, they're not relying on instinct. They're measuring what actually moved engagement, retention, and ultimately revenue. And as more teams build with AI, that learning loop becomes even more important. Building with LLMs introduces non-determinism into your product experience. The same input doesn't always produce the same output, and behavior can shift in subtle ways in real-world use.
So doing offline evals will give you part of the picture, but you can really only understand the impact once your product is live with real users, and then you can measure how their behavior actually changes. It's very different than the way that you would ship features in a pre-AI world where you knew exactly what the software was going to do in production.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is where StatSig comes in. It brings experimentation, feature flags, and product analytics into one unified system so teams can ship safely, test rigorously, and directly link what they changed to how users actually behaved. The result is a tighter feedback loop and learning that compounds over time, so you don't just ship more, you ship better.
So if you want to make learning your competitive advantage, whether you're building new AI experiences or just evolving your existing core product, go to statsig.com/acquired to get started.
All right, that's all we've got. If you aren't subscribed and you want to hear more, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast client now. If you're a longtime listener, or even if you've just picked us up and you really like us, we don't ask for much, but we would really, really love if you'd share about us on Twitter, share about us on Facebook, leave a review. It's how we grow the show, and it's how we can reach more people and do more things. So thank you so much for being a listener, and we will hear you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Huh?